The candle had burned down to a stub again, and Fiona Reynolds knew she should stop for the night, but her fingers kept moving through the pale muslin, the needle flashing silver in the moonlight that streamed through her tiny cabin window. It was 1867, and in the rough mining town of San Pedro, nestled in the dry hills of southern Arizona Territory, most respectable women were already asleep. But Fiona had learned long ago that respectability did not fill an empty stomach or pay for lamp oil. She sewed by moonlight because candles cost money, and every cent she could save went toward the dream of opening her own dress shop one day, a real establishment with glass windows and a painted sign that bore her name. The knock at her door startled her so badly that she pricked her finger, a bright bead of blood welling up against her pale skin. She sucked on the wound and set down her work, her heart hammering. Nobody knocked at this hour unless something was wrong. San Pedro was not a gentle place, and a woman alone had reason to be cautious. "Who is it?" she called, her voice steadier than she felt. "Name is Zachary Donovan, madam," came a deep voice from the other side of the rough wooden door. "I apologize for the late hour. I have some fabric I thought you might want to purchase. I can come back tomorrow if you prefer." Fabric. The word made her forget her caution for a moment. Good fabric was scarce in San Pedro, and what the general store carried was either poor quality or priced so high that only the mine owner's wife could afford it. Fiona had been making do with scraps and repurposed material for months now, turning old curtains into petticoats and worn shirts into children's dresses. But late-night visits from strange men were dangerous, no matter what they claimed to be selling. "How did you know I sew?" she asked, not moving toward the door. "Tom Carter at the general store mentioned you when I asked if anyone in town might be interested in some bolts of cloth. Said you do fine work and might pay fair for quality material." Tom Carter. That was true enough. The store owner had been kind to Fiona since she arrived in San Pedro 8 months ago, fleeing from a failed engagement in California and desperate for a fresh start. He had spread word of her services and even displayed some of her work in his front window. Fiona opened the door just a crack, keeping her foot braced behind it. The man who stood on her narrow porch took her breath away, though she would never have admitted it. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with shoulders so broad they nearly blocked out the moonlight behind him. His hair fell past his collar in dark waves, and despite the warm Arizona night, he wore buckskin clothing that spoke of mountain country rather than desert territory. His arms, visible where his sleeves had been rolled back, were corded with muscle, and his hands, holding a bundle wrapped in oilcloth, looked strong enough to break rocks. "I apologize again for the hour, Miss Reynolds," he said, and she noticed he had light eyes, though she could not tell the exact color in the dim light. "I just came down from the mountains this afternoon. Been trapping up north for the past 4 months. I bought this fabric from a trader in Tucson, thought I might sell it here for a profit, but Tom said you would give me a fairer deal than trying to negotiate with the mining company." "You are a trapper?" Fiona asked, though the answer was obvious from his appearance. "Mountain man, yes, madam. Been living up in the high country most of my life. I come down to the settlements a few times a year to trade furs and supplies." Against her better judgment, Fiona found herself opening the door wider. There was something honest in his face, something that made her instincts quiet their warnings. "Let me see what you have." Zachary Donovan stepped into her small cabin, and the space immediately felt smaller. He had to duck slightly to clear the door frame, and his presence seemed to fill every corner. He moved carefully, though, as if aware of his size and trying not to be threatening. He set his bundle on her work table and unwrapped it with surprising gentleness for such large hands. Fiona gasped. In the moonlight and the guttering candle flame, she could see bolt after bolt of beautiful fabric. There was deep blue calico, rich brown wool, cream-colored cotton so fine it was almost like silk, and even a length of actual silk in a shade of green that reminded her of spring grass, something she had not seen since leaving California. "Where did you get this?" she whispered, reaching out to touch the silk with reverent fingers. Trader had it from a wagon train that decided to lighten their load before crossing into California. They sold off everything they could spare. He gave me a good price, and I am hoping to pass that along. Zachary quoted her figures that made her eyes widen. They were more than fair. They were practically charity. "This is too low," she said, looking up at him with suspicion. "You could get twice this at the mining company store." "Could," he agreed, "but they would resell it for 4 times what they paid me, and nobody in this town except the owner's family could afford it. Tom said you sew for the working folks, the miners' wives and the shop girls. Figured you could use good material at a price that lets you keep your own prices fair." Fiona studied him in the flickering light. His face was weathered from sun and wind, with lines around his eyes that spoke of years spent squinting at distant horizons. He had a strong jaw covered in several days' worth of dark beard, and that same honest quality she had noticed before. He looked like a man who said what he meant and meant what he said. "Why do you care about the working folks of San Pedro?" she asked. "I was working folks once," he said simply. "My pa was a miner in Colorado before the work killed him. My ma took in sewing to keep us fed." He glanced at her work table, at the half-finished dress laid out there. "She used to sew by candlelight, then by moonlight when the candles ran out. I remember that." Something in Fiona's chest tightened. She looked at the fabric again, running calculations in her head. If she bought all of it at his price, she would spend nearly every cent of her savings. But the dresses and shirts she could make from material this fine would bring in 3 times what she usually earned. She could afford real candles, maybe even lamp oil. She could build her savings back up in a matter of months. "I will take it all," she said, the words coming out in a rush before she could second-guess herself. "But I need to count out the money. It will take a few minutes." "I am in no hurry," Zachary said. Fiona retrieved her money box from its hiding place under a loose floorboard. She counted out the coins carefully, aware of his eyes on her, though he stood respectfully near the door and did not try to see where she had hidden her savings. When she handed him the payment, their fingers brushed, and she felt a spark of something that had nothing to do with the dry Arizona air. "Thank you," she said. "This will help me more than you know." "I am glad," he said, and smiled for the first time. It transformed his face, making him look younger and less weathered. "Tom mentioned you are saving to open your own shop." "Someday," Fiona said. "It is probably a foolish dream." "Does not sound foolish to me," Zachary said. "Sounds like good business sense. This town is growing. More women arriving every month. They will need a dressmaker." He moved toward the door, then paused. "I will be in town for a few days, staying at the boarding house. If you need help moving this fabric or anything else, just send word." "Thank you, Mr. Donovan," Fiona said. "Zachary," he corrected. "Just Zachary." "Then you should call me Fiona." He smiled again, and then he was gone, ducking through her doorway and disappearing into the night. Fiona closed and bolted the door, then turned to look at the treasure trove of fabric on her table. Her fingers itched to start working immediately, but exhaustion was finally catching up with her. She allowed herself to stroke the green silk one more time, imagining it made up into a beautiful dress, before banking her candle and climbing into her narrow bed. She dreamed of mountain meadows and a man with gentle hands. The next morning, Fiona woke with the sun and immediately set to work. She carefully folded the new fabric and stored it in her trunk, except for the blue calico, which she laid out on her cutting table. Mrs. Henderson, the blacksmith's wife, had ordered a new dress weeks ago, and Fiona had been putting her off, waiting until she could find fabric nice enough to do justice to the woman's generous payment. This calico would be perfect. She was deep in her cutting when another knock came at her door. This time it was full daylight and she opened it without hesitation. Tom Carter stood on her porch, his round face beaming. "Morning, Fiona. Heard Zachary Donovan stopped by last night. Wanted to make sure everything was above board. I know I sent him your way, but I got to thinking afterward that maybe I should have checked with you first." "It was fine, Tom," Fiona assured him. "He had beautiful fabric at very fair prices. I bought everything he had." Tom's eyebrows shot up. "Everything? That must have been your whole savings." "Nearly," Fiona admitted. "But it was worth it. Look at this calico. Have you ever seen such an even weave?" Tom examined the fabric and whistled. "That is fine quality. Zachary is a good man, known him for a few years now. He comes through San Pedro regular, trading furs and such. Always gives fair deals, never causes trouble. Lives up in the mountains most of the year, somewhere north of here in the high country." "He mentioned his mother was a seamstress," Fiona said, trying to sound casual. Tom nodded. "That is right. She passed some years back. Zachary was devoted to her, took care of her until the end. He is a good son, which usually means he would make a good husband too." He winked at Fiona, who felt her cheeks flush. "I am not looking for a husband, Tom." "Maybe not," Tom said, "but you could do worse than a man like Zachary Donovan. He is honest, hard-working, and from what I hear, he has done well with his trapping. Probably has a nice sum saved up." "I have work to do," Fiona said firmly, but she was smiling. Tom laughed and took his leave. Fiona returned to her cutting, but her mind kept wandering to the mountain man who had appeared at her door like something out of a story. She told herself to be practical. Men like Zachary Donovan, men who lived free in the mountains, did not settle down with seamstresses in dusty Arizona towns. He would be gone in a few days, back to his wild country, and she would likely never see him again. That thought made her sadder than it should have. She worked through the morning, her needle flashing as she pieced together Mrs. Henderson's dress. By noon, the heat was oppressive, and she took a break to eat a simple meal of bread and cheese. She was just cleaning up when she heard voices outside, raised in anger. She went to her window and saw a crowd gathering near the general store. Curious and concerned, Fiona locked her door and walked down the dusty street. San Pedro was not a large town, just a main street with a few side roads, built to service the silver mine that dominated the nearby hills. Most of the buildings were rough wood structures, though the mine owner had built himself a grand house on the hill overlooking everything. The people who lived here were a mix of miners, shop owners, and the various folks who made their living supporting both groups. As she approached the crowd, she saw Zachary at the center of it, facing down three rough-looking men. One of them, a big man named Dutch Keller who worked as an enforcer for the mine owner, was jabbing his finger into Zachary's chest. "You sold that fabric to the little seamstress for half what you should have charged," Dutch was saying. "Mr. Patterson wants to buy it from her, and he is not happy about paying inflated prices because you decided to play charity." "I sold my property for the price I wanted," Zachary said calmly. His voice was level, but Fiona could see the tension in his shoulders. "What Miss Reynolds does with it now is her business. Everything in this town is Mr. Patterson's business," Dutch said. "And he says that fabric should have been sold through the company store." "Then Mr. Patterson should have been the first to make me an offer," Zachary said. "He was not. Transaction is done." Dutch grabbed Zachary's shirt, and faster than Fiona could follow, Zachary had the bigger man's arm twisted behind his back. The two men with Dutch reached for their guns, but Zachary spoke quickly. "I do not want trouble. I came here to trade, not to fight. But I will not be bullied, and I will not have Miss Reynolds harassed over a fair business deal." "Let him go," came a new voice. Fiona turned to see Sheriff Morrison pushing through the crowd. He was an older man, weathered and tired, but still commanding respect. "Dutch, you and your boys move along. There is no law against selling goods to whoever you please." Dutch glared at Zachary but stepped back when he was released. "Mr. Patterson is not going to like this." "Then Mr. Patterson can come talk to me himself," the sheriff said. "Now move along before I find a reason to lock you up." The three men left, Dutch shooting dark looks over his shoulder. The crowd began to disperse, and Fiona found herself hurrying toward Zachary. "Are you all right?" she asked. He turned, surprise and pleasure crossing his face when he saw her. "I am fine. I am sorry if that caused you any trouble. You were defending me." "Well, defending your right to buy fabric without interference," Zachary said. He flexed his hand, which Fiona noticed was scraped across the knuckles. "I did not come to town looking for a fight." "Come to my place," Fiona said impulsively. "Let me clean that hand. It is the least I can do." Zachary looked like he might argue, but then he nodded. "I would appreciate that." They walked back to her cabin together, and Fiona was acutely aware of the looks they were getting. She knew there would be talk, but she found she did not care. The man had stood up for her against the mine owner's thugs. That counted for more than propriety. Inside her cabin, she had Zachary sit at her work table while she pumped water into a basin and found a clean cloth. His hand was not badly hurt, just scraped and slightly bleeding. She cleaned it gently, aware of how rough and calloused his skin was, marked by years of hard work. "You did not have to stand up to them," she said quietly. "Mr. Patterson is a powerful man in this town." "All the more reason someone should stand up to him," Zachary said. "I have met men like him before. They only respect strength. If he thinks he can push people around without consequence, he will keep doing it." Still, it was brave and foolish. Zachary laughed, a deep, warm sound that filled the small cabin. "I have been called both things before." Fiona finished bandaging his hand with a strip of clean muslin. "There, try not to get into any more fights for a few days." "I will do my best," he said, but he did not move to leave. He was looking at her work table at the pieces of blue calico laid out there. "You are making a dress for Mrs. Henderson, the blacksmith's wife. It should have been done a week ago, but I was waiting for good fabric." "May I watch you work for a bit?" Zachary asked. "I always enjoyed watching my mother sew. There is something peaceful about it." Fiona hesitated, then nodded. She returned to her work, very aware of his presence as he sat quietly at the end of her table. Her needle seemed clumsy at first, self-conscious under his gaze, but gradually she fell into the familiar rhythm. The work calmed her as it always did, the world narrowing to just the fabric and thread, and the vision in her mind of how the finished piece would look. "You are very skilled," Zachary said after a while. "My mother would have admired your work." "Thank you," Fiona said. "Did she teach you anything about sewing?" "A bit. I can mend my own clothes, make simple repairs. Nothing like what you do, though. This is art." "It is survival," Fiona said, but she was pleased by the compliment. "Can be both," Zachary said. They fell into comfortable silence. Outside, the afternoon heat built, but inside the cabin it was relatively cool, and Fiona felt more content than she had in months. There was something about Zachary's presence that was both exciting and soothing. He made her feel safe, but also alive in a way she had almost forgotten. "Tell me about the mountains," she said after a while. "What is it like up there?" Zachary's face softened. "It is beautiful." cold and hard, especially in winter, but beautiful. There are meadows full of wildflowers in summer, and streams so clear you can see every pebble on the bottom. The air smells like pine and snow, even in the warm months. At night, the stars are so thick you feel like you could reach up and grab a handful. It sounds wonderful, Fiona said wistfully. It can be lonely, Zachary admitted. I have a cabin up there, built it myself over a few years. It is comfortable enough, but there are weeks when I do not see another soul. Sometimes I wonder what I am doing up there, living like a hermit. Why do you do it then? Zachary was quiet for a moment. Freedom, I suppose. After my mother died, I did not see the point in staying in the settlements. Nothing holding me there. In the mountains, I answer to nobody but myself. I go where I want, do what I want. There is value in that. But, Fiona prompted, sensing there was more. But lately it has felt less like freedom and more like running away, Zachary said. I have been thinking maybe it is time to find something to run toward instead. Their eyes met, and Fiona felt that spark again, stronger this time. She looked away first, focusing on her stitching. How long will you stay in San Pedro? She asked. I was planning on just a few days, but I could stay longer if I had a reason to. Fiona's needle paused. She looked up at him, at his honest face and his steady gaze, and felt something shift in her chest, like a door opening that she had kept locked for a long time. You barely know me, she said. I know you work by moonlight to save money, Zachary said. I know you are brave enough to spend your savings on a gamble. I know you make beautiful things with your hands and you have kind eyes. That is more than I have known about most people I have met. I came here running away too, Fiona confessed. From California. I was engaged to a man there, a merchant's son. He seemed kind at first, but as the wedding got closer, I started seeing his true nature. He was controlling, jealous. He wanted a wife who would sit quietly at home and never question him. When I called off the engagement, my family was furious. They said I was throwing away my future, so I took what little money I had and came here. That took courage, Zachary said, or stupidity. I am not sure which. Courage, Zachary said firmly. Any fool can stay in a bad situation because it is easier than leaving. Takes real strength to walk away and build something new. Fiona felt tears prick her eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. Nobody had told her she was brave for leaving. Her family had called her foolish, ungrateful, selfish. The few friends she had left behind had said she was making a mistake. Only Tom Carter, when she had arrived in San Pedro desperate and nearly penniless, had told her she could make it if she worked hard enough. Thank you, she whispered. Zachary reached across the table and gently covered her hand with his. I know we just met, and you have no reason to trust me. But I would like to get to know you better if you will let me. I will be in town for a while longer. Maybe we could take a walk sometime, or I could buy you dinner at the boarding house. Fiona looked at their hands, his so much larger and darker than hers, roughened by work while hers were marked by needle pricks and calluses from pushing thread through thick fabric. They were both workers, both survivors. Maybe that was enough of a foundation to build on. I would like that, she said. Zachary smiled, and Fiona felt her heart skip in a way that was both terrifying and wonderful. Over the next week, Zachary became a fixture in San Pedro. He stayed at the boarding house but spent his days helping wherever he was needed. He assisted the blacksmith with some heavy work, helped repair the roof on the church, and even spent an afternoon helping old Mr. Chen at the laundry carry heavy loads of water. He did not ask for payment, waving off offers with a smile and a shake of his head. And every evening, he would come to Fiona's cabin just as the sun was setting. Sometimes they would walk together through the town and out into the desert hills, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about his life in the mountains, about tracking animals and reading the weather in the shape of clouds. She told him about her childhood in California, about learning to sew from her grandmother, about her dreams of one day having her own shop with her name painted on the door in gold letters. Other evenings, he would sit at her work table while she sewed, and they would talk or sometimes just sit in comfortable silence. Fiona found herself looking forward to these visits more than she wanted to admit. Zachary made her feel seen in a way she never had before. He asked her opinion about things and listened to her answers. He complimented her work without condescension, recognizing the skill and artistry in what she did. One evening, about 10 days after they met, Zachary brought her a gift. It was a small carved wooden box, beautifully made with dove-tail joints and a lid that fit perfectly. "For your sewing notions," he explained, looking almost shy. "I made it in my cabin last winter, been carrying it around, not sure what to do with it." Fiona opened the box and found that the inside was divided into small compartments, perfect for organizing needles, thread, and buttons. It was the most thoughtful gift anyone had ever given her. "It is beautiful," she said, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "Did you really make this?" "I have a lot of time on my hands in the winter," Zachary said. "I taught myself woodworking to keep from going mad from boredom." Fiona looked up at him, this big, strong man who could face down thugs without flinching but who had spent his winter evenings carving a delicate wooden box. Her heart, which she had been trying to keep carefully guarded, surrendered completely. "Thank you," she said. "I will treasure it." That night when Zachary left, he kissed her for the first time. It was gentle and sweet, his large hand cupping her cheek as if she were something precious that might break. When he pulled away, Fiona felt dizzy and warm and more alive than she had ever felt in her life. "I should go," Zachary said, his voice rough. "It is getting late." "Yes," Fiona agreed, but neither of them moved. "Fiona," Zachary said, and the way he said her name made her shiver. "I need to tell you something. I am falling in love with you. Have been since that first night when I saw you sitting by moonlight, sewing like some kind of fairy tale. I know it is fast, and I know you might not feel the same, but I needed you to know." Fiona's breath caught. "I feel the same," she whispered. "It terrifies me, but I feel the same." Zachary's smile was like the sun coming up. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Fiona melted into him, feeling safe and desired and cherished all at once. When he finally left, she closed her door and leaned against it, her heart racing. She was in love with a mountain man. It was crazy and impractical and probably doomed, but she could not bring herself to care. For the first time since leaving California, she felt truly happy. The next morning, trouble came calling. Fiona was working on a shirt for one of the miners when heavy footsteps sounded on her porch. She opened the door to find Dutch Keller and his 2 associates standing there, along with a thin, well-dressed man she recognized as Mr. Patterson, the mine owner. "Miss Reynolds," Patterson said, tipping his hat with exaggerated politeness. "I apologize for the unannounced visit. I wanted to discuss a business proposition with you." Fiona's instincts screamed at her to close the door, but she forced herself to remain calm. "What kind of proposition?" "I understand you purchased a quantity of fabric from a mountain trapper recently. I would like to buy it from you at a fair price, double what you paid, in fact. It was a generous offer except for one thing. The fabric is not for sale, Mr. Patterson. I am using it for my business." Patterson's smile did not reach his eyes. "I insist." "You see, that fabric should have been sold through the company store. The trapper had no right to circumvent proper business channels. By purchasing it, you were complicit in defrauding the company." "That is ridiculous," Fiona said. "There is no law that says goods have to be sold through your store." "Perhaps not a written law," Patterson said, "but there are understandings in this town. I control the mine, which means I control most of the employment. People who do not cooperate with me often find life here very difficult." "Are you threatening me?" Fiona asked, anger overriding her fear. "I am offering you a fair deal. Take it, and we will forget this unpleasantness. Refuse, and you may find that your customers suddenly have reasons to take their business elsewhere." Fiona opened her mouth to tell him exactly where he could stick his deal, but a familiar voice cut through the air. The lady said no. Everyone turned. Zachary was striding toward the cabin, his face dark with anger. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, and despite his calm voice, there was something dangerous in his posture. "This does not concern you, Donovan," Patterson said. "Anything concerning Fiona concerns me," Zachary said. He stepped onto the porch, placing himself between Fiona and the men. "And you have no claim on that fabric. I sold it in a legitimate transaction. What happens to it now is none of your business." "Everything in this town is my business," Patterson said, his facade of politeness cracking. "Then you have a skewed understanding of business and ownership," Zachary said. "Now, I suggest you and your men leave. The lady has work to do." Dutch stepped forward, his hand moving toward his gun. "You do not give orders here, mountain man." Zachary's hand shot out and caught Dutch's wrist before the gun cleared its holster. "I am giving you a chance to walk away," Zachary said quietly. "Take it." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Patterson made a sharp gesture and Dutch stepped back, his face red with anger and humiliation. "This is not over," Patterson said to Fiona. "You will regret making an enemy of me." "The only thing I regret is opening my door to you," Fiona shot back, surprised by her own boldness. Patterson and his men left, Dutch throwing dark looks over his shoulder. When they were gone, Fiona let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. "Thank you," she said to Zachary, "though I think you just made things worse." "He was always going to be a problem," Zachary said. "Men like him do not like it when people stand up to them, but they respect strength. He will think twice before bothering you again. Or he will find a way to run me out of town," Fiona said, fear creeping in now that the confrontation was over. Zachary took her hands in his. "I will not let that happen, I promise you." "You cannot fight the whole town," Fiona said. "And you cannot stay here forever. You have your life in the mountains." Zachary looked at her intently. "What if I did not go back? What if I stayed here in San Pedro?" Fiona's heart skipped. "You would do that. I have been thinking about it," Zachary said. "There is work here. The town is growing. I could hire on as a guide for people wanting to explore the territory, or I could continue trading. I have saved up a good amount over the years, enough to buy some land, maybe build a house." "You would give up your freedom?" Fiona asked. "Your mountains?" "I would not be giving them up," Zachary said, "just visiting them less often, and it would not feel like a sacrifice if I was coming home to you." Tears filled Fiona's eyes. "Zachary, we have only known each other for less than 2 weeks." "I know. And if you need more time, I will give it to you. But I know what I feel, Fiona. I love you. I want to build a life with you. I want to help you open that dress shop you dream about. I want to come home every evening and watch you work by lamplight instead of moonlight, because we will have enough money for all the lamp oil we need. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep next to you every night. I want all of it, if you will have me." Fiona looked at him, this strong, gentle man who had appeared in her life like an answer to prayers. She had not known how to speak. She thought about the months of loneliness, of working until her fingers bled, of dreaming of a future that seemed always just out of reach. And she thought about how different everything felt with Zachary beside her. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will have you. I will marry you if that is what you are asking." "It is exactly what I am asking," Zachary said and pulled her into his arms. They were married 3 days later by the circuit preacher who happened to be passing through San Pedro. It was a simple ceremony in the little church, with Tom Carter and his wife standing as witnesses. Fiona wore a dress she had made from the green silk, the color bringing out the red highlights in her dark hair. Zachary wore new clothes he had purchased from the general store, his long hair pulled back neatly, his jaw clean shaven for the occasion. The whole town seemed to turn out for the wedding, everyone curious about the seamstress and the mountain man who had found each other so quickly. Even some of Patterson's miners came, defying their employer to wish the couple well. Only Patterson himself and his closest associates stayed away, which suited everyone just fine. After the ceremony, Tom Carter hosted a celebration at his store, with food and drink and music provided by a miner who played the fiddle. Fiona danced with her new husband, laughing as he spun her around with surprising grace for such a big man. "You are full of surprises," she told him. "My mother loved to dance," he said. "She taught me when I was young, said a man should know how to dance with his wife." "Your mother was a wise woman," Fiona said. "She would have loved you," Zachary said, and kissed her there in front of everyone. That night, Zachary carried Fiona over the threshold of her cabin, which was now their cabin. He set her down gently and looked around the small space. "We are going to need a bigger place," he said. "This will not do for the long term." "We will make it work," Fiona said. "We have time to find something bigger." But Zachary was already making plans. "There is a piece of land on the edge of town near the creek. I have had my eye on it. It is big enough to build a proper house, with room for your dress shop in front and living quarters in back. We could have a real business, Fiona, the kind you have been dreaming about." "That would cost a fortune," Fiona said. "I have money saved," Zachary said. "More than you might think. I have been trapping for years, living simple and putting most of my profits away. Never had anything I wanted to spend it on before. Now I do." Fiona felt tears threatening again. She seemed to cry more since meeting Zachary than she had in years, but they were good tears, happy tears. "We should wait," she said practically. "Make sure this is really what you want. Make sure you do not regret giving up your old life." Zachary cupped her face in his hands. "The only thing I would regret is not doing everything in my power to make you happy. You are my life now, Fiona. You and whatever future we build together." He kissed her then, and talking stopped for quite some time. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. Zachary purchased the land near the creek and hired a crew to start building. He had plans drawn up for a structure that was part shop, part house, with large windows across the front to display Fiona's work and comfortable living quarters behind. While the building was being constructed, Fiona continued working from the cabin, but word of her skill and her fine fabrics had spread, and she had more orders than she could handle. Zachary proved to be as good a businessman as he was a trapper. He made contacts with traders passing through, arranging regular deliveries of quality fabric at fair prices. He also started a guide service, leading wealthy tourists from the east on expeditions into the mountains. The work suited him, allowing him to spend time in his beloved high country while still returning home to Fiona regularly. Patterson made a few more attempts to cause trouble, spreading rumors and trying to pressure Fiona's customers, but the town had taken the couple to their hearts. People respected Zachary's strength and fairness, and they appreciated Fiona's skill and reasonable prices. The mine owner's efforts fell flat, and eventually he gave up, focusing his attention on easier targets. By the time winter arrived, the new building was complete. Fiona's dress shop, the sign said in gold letters, just as she had always dreamed. The front room was spacious and well lit, with displays of her best work and shelves stocked with fabric in every color imaginable. The back held their living quarters, a proper bedroom, a kitchen with a real stove, and even a small parlor where they could entertain guests. On the day they moved in, Fiona stood in the front room and cried. Zachary wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on top of her head. "Happy tears?" he asked. "The happiest," she confirmed. "I never thought I would have this, my own shop, a real home. You earned it," Zachary said. "Every bit of it. I just helped where I could." "You did more than help," Fiona said, turning in his arms. "You made it all possible. You believed in me when I barely believed in myself." "Always will," Zachary promised. The shop thrived. Women came from San Pedro and the surrounding settlements to buy Fiona's dresses and have garments custom-made. She hired 2 assistants, young women from town who showed promise with a needle, and she trained them the way her grandmother had trained her. Zachary's guide service also flourished, and he began to be known throughout the territory as the best mountain guide available, knowledgeable and reliable. Despite their growing prosperity, they remained grounded. Fiona still sometimes sewed by lamplight late into the evening, though now it was by choice rather than necessity. Zachary still made his trips into the mountains, though never for as long as he had before. They were building something together, and both of them treasured it. In the spring of 1868, Fiona realized she was pregnant. She told Zachary one evening after closing the shop, nervous about how he might react. They had not talked much about children, both of them so focused on establishing their business and their life together. Zachary's response was to pick her up and spin her around, laughing with pure joy. "A baby! We are going to have a baby! You are happy?" Fiona asked, relieved. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Zachary said, setting her down carefully as if she might break. "Are you happy?" "Terrified," Fiona admitted. "But yes, very happy." "You are going to be an amazing mother," Zachary said. "And you will be an amazing father," Fiona said. "You are already the best husband I could have asked for." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Fiona continued working in the shop, though Zachary insisted she rest more and delegate more tasks to her assistants. He cut back on his guiding trips, staying close to home as her due date approached. The whole town seemed excited about the baby, with customers bringing gifts and offering advice, wanted and otherwise. In early November, after a long labor that left Zachary pacing the floor in a panic, Fiona delivered a healthy baby boy. They named him Samuel, after Zachary's father. He had his mother's dark hair and his father's light eyes, and both parents fell instantly and completely in love. "He is perfect," Zachary whispered, holding his son with a gentleness that belied his size and strength. "Absolutely perfect." "Takes after his father," Fiona said, exhausted but glowing. "No, he definitely takes after his mother," Zachary said. "He has your nose." They spent the next hour arguing playfully about whose features the baby had inherited, until Samuel made it clear he was hungry and cared nothing for his parents' debate. The first year of Samuel's life was exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. The shop continued to prosper, and Fiona discovered she could manage both motherhood and business ownership, though there were definitely challenging days. Zachary was a devoted father, often seen walking through town with Samuel strapped to his chest, pointing out birds and clouds and mountains to his son, who was too young to understand, but who seemed to find his father's voice soothing. On their second wedding anniversary, Zachary took Fiona up into the foothills for a picnic, leaving Samuel with Tom Carter's wife for the afternoon. It was the first time they had been alone together since the baby was born, and Fiona was surprised by how much she had missed having her husband to herself. They spread a blanket in a meadow full of autumn wildflowers. the mountains rising blue and majestic in the distance. Zachary unpacked the basket of food they had brought while Fiona lay back and looked at the sky. "I had almost forgotten how quiet it could be," she said. "Too quiet?" Zachary asked, lying down beside her. "No, it is perfect," Fiona said. She turned her head to look at him. "These past 2 years have been the best of my life. I hope you know that." "Mine too," Zachary said. "Though I have to admit, there are times I miss the simplicity of my old life. Just me and the mountains, nobody to worry about but myself." Fiona's heart sank a little, though she tried not to let it show. "Do you regret staying in San Pedro, getting married?" Zachary sat up quickly. "No, God, no, Fiona, that came out wrong." He took her hands, his expression earnest. "What I meant is that my old life was simple, but it was also empty. I did not realize how empty until I met you. These past 2 years have been complicated and messy and sometimes exhausting, but they have also been full in a way my life never was before. I would not trade a single moment of it." "You are sure?" Fiona asked. "You do not feel trapped?" "I feel free," Zachary said. "Freer than I ever did in the mountains alone. You want to know why? Why? Because I am free to love you, free to be a husband and a father, free to build something that matters, something that will last after I am gone. That is real freedom, Fiona. Not running away from connection, but running toward it." Fiona pulled him down and kissed him. "I love you." "I love you too," Zachary said. "Always will." They lay together in the meadow as the sun moved across the sky, talking and laughing and simply enjoying being together. By the time they returned to San Pedro to collect Samuel, Fiona felt renewed, reminded of why she had taken a chance on the mountain man who appeared at her door with fabric and dreams of a better future. 2 more years passed in a blur of work and family and small joys. The shop expanded again, with Fiona hiring 2 more assistants to keep up with demand. Zachary's reputation as a guide grew, and he started leading longer expeditions, though he always made sure to be home more than he was gone. Samuel grew into a bright, energetic toddler who loved nothing more than following his father around and helping with whatever project Zachary was working on. In the spring of 1871, Fiona became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was harder. She was sick for months, unable to keep food down, exhausted all the time. Zachary took over much of the shop management, learning more about fabrics and sewing than he had ever thought he would need to know. He also took care of Samuel, cooking meals and trying to keep everything running smoothly while Fiona rested. "I feel useless," Fiona said one evening, frustrated by her weakness. "You are growing our child," Zachary said. "That is not useless. I should be working. The shop needs me." "The shop is fine," Zachary assured her. "Your assistants are very capable and I am learning. We are managing. You just focus on resting and staying healthy." In August, Fiona went into labor a month earlier than expected. The birth was difficult and frightening, with complications that had the midwife calling for the doctor from the mining company. For several hours, Zachary paced outside their bedroom, holding Samuel and praying harder than he had ever prayed in his life. Finally, the doctor emerged. "You have a daughter," he said. "She is small but healthy. Your wife is very weak, though. She needs rest and care." Zachary handed Samuel to Tom Carter's wife, who had come to help, and rushed into the bedroom. Fiona lay pale and exhausted in their bed, but she was smiling weakly. In her arms was the tiniest baby Zachary had ever seen, with a wisp of red gold hair and delicate features. "Meet Rose," Fiona whispered. "I know we had not decided on names yet, but when I saw her, Rose just felt right." "Rose is perfect," Zachary said, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. He touched his daughter's tiny hand with one finger, awed by how small and fragile she was. "She is perfect, and so are you." I was so scared, Fiona admitted. The doctor said there were problems. But you are both fine now, Zachary said firmly, refusing to think about how close he might have come to losing them. That is all that matters. Fiona's recovery took weeks. Zachary hired a woman from town to help with the house and the baby while Fiona regained her strength. He cut back on his guiding trips to almost nothing, spending his days managing the shop and his evenings caring for his family. Samuel, initially jealous of the new baby, gradually warmed to his little sister, bringing her his favorite toys and patting her head gently when she cried. By the time Rose was 6 months old, Fiona had recovered most of her strength, though she tired more easily than before. The doctor warned her that another pregnancy might be dangerous, and she and Zachary had a long, difficult conversation about their future. I do not need more children, Zachary said. I have Samuel and Rose. I have you. That is more than enough. Are you sure? Fiona asked. You came from a big family. I know you wanted several children. I want you alive and healthy, Zachary said bluntly. Everything else is secondary to that. Samuel and Rose are blessings, but you are the center of everything, Fiona. Without you, none of this matters. Fiona cried, though she tried to hide it. She had wanted more children too, but the doctor's warnings had been clear. Another pregnancy could kill her, and she owed it to Samuel and Rose and Zachary to be careful. We have a good life, she said finally. 2 beautiful children, a successful business, each other. You are right. That is more than enough. Time moved forward. Samuel started school, proving to be a bright student with his father's curiosity and his mother's attention to detail. Rose grew into a beautiful child with her mother's coloring and her father's adventurous spirit. The shop continued to thrive, with Fiona's reputation spreading far beyond San Pedro. Women from as far as Tucson would make the journey to commission dresses from the famous seamstress who had started with nothing and built an empire. Zachary's guide business also evolved. He began leading scientific expeditions, guiding scholars and naturalists who wanted to study the mountains and deserts of the territory. The work was fascinating, and he enjoyed sharing his knowledge of the land with people who appreciated it. He still made trips into the high country alone sometimes, needing that connection to his past, but he was always eager to return home. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Zachary surprised Fiona with a trip. He arranged for the children to stay with Tom Carter's family for a week, then took Fiona up into the mountains to his old cabin. It was a long journey on horseback, through desert, and then up into pine forests as the elevation increased. The cabin was small and rustic, just one room with a stone fireplace and a sleeping loft, but it was well built and solid. Zachary had not been there in over a year, and he spent the first day cleaning and making repairs while Fiona explored the meadow around the cabin. "This is where you lived?" she asked, marveling at the wild beauty of the place. "For years. This is where I existed," Zachary corrected. "I did not really start living until I met you. That week in the mountains was magical." They hiked through meadows of wildflowers, swam in clear, cold streams, and spent their evenings sitting by the fire, talking and making love and simply being together without the demands of business and family pulling at them. Fiona saw a side of Zachary she had only glimpsed before, the wild, free mountain man he had been. But she also saw that he was content with the life they had built, that he did not regret the choice he had made to leave this behind. On their last night at the cabin, they lay together in the sleeping loft, listening to the wind in the pines. "Thank you for showing me this," Fiona said. "Now I understand you better, I think. Why you needed the solitude, but also why you were ready to leave it behind." "I was lonely," Zachary said simply. "I did not fully realize it at the time, but I was desperately lonely. When I saw you that first night sewing by moonlight, something in me recognized something in you. We were both alone, both working toward dreams that seemed impossible. I knew I wanted to be part of your life, part of your dream. You became my dream, Fiona said. The shop, the house, everything I thought I wanted, it all paled in comparison to you. You gave me everything I needed when you gave me yourself. They made love then, slow and tender, and afterward Fiona fell asleep in Zachary's arms, feeling safe and cherished and completely happy. When they returned to San Pedro, they found that their children had been perfect angels for the Carters, and the shop had run smoothly in Fiona's absence. Life returned to normal, but both of them carried the memory of that week in the mountains, a reminder of their love and their commitment to each other. More years passed. Samuel grew into a tall, strong boy who loved the mountains as much as his father. He often accompanied Zachary on shorter guide trips, learning to track and navigate and survive in the wilderness. Rose showed talent with a needle and thread, often sitting with her mother in the shop, learning to sew. Fiona taught her the same way her grandmother had taught her, with patience and encouragement. The town of San Pedro continued to grow. The silver mine expanded, bringing more people and more business. New shops opened, including a rival dress shop run by a woman from back east. Fiona was not worried, though. She had established herself, and her customers were loyal. There was room for multiple businesses in a growing town. Patterson, the mine owner, eventually moved on to bigger opportunities in California, selling his interest in the mine to a company that proved to be much more reasonable to deal with. The new owners invested in the town, building a proper school and funding improvements to the roads. San Pedro was becoming civilized, and while Fiona and Zachary sometimes missed the rough, simple days when they first met, they appreciated the stability and opportunities that growth brought. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Fiona insisted on working late at the shop. She had a special project she wanted to complete. Zachary waited patiently, sitting in his usual spot at the end of her work table, watching her fingers fly through the fabric. "What are you making?" he finally asked. "A shirt," Fiona said. "For you, I have shirts." "Not like this one," Fiona said. She held up the fabric so he could see. It was fine linen, dyed a deep blue that brought out his eyes. She had embroidered the collar and cuffs with a subtle pattern of mountains and pine trees. "I have been working on it for months, a little bit each night after you fall asleep." Zachary touched the shirt reverently. "It is beautiful, too fine for everyday wear." "I want you to have something special," Fiona said. "You have given me so much, my shop, our home, our family. I wanted to give you something made by my own hands, something that shows how much I love you." "You give me something made by your hands every day," Zachary said. "You gave me Samuel and Rose. You give me your love and your trust and your partnership. That is more valuable than all the fine shirts in the world." "Try it on anyway," Fiona said. Zachary pulled off his work shirt and slipped on the new one. It fit perfectly, tailored to his broad shoulders and long arms. He looked at himself in the mirror Fiona kept in the shop, and she saw his eyes get misty. "I look respectable," he said with wonder. "Like a real townsman instead of a wild mountain man." "You look like yourself," Fiona said. "Like the man who brought me fabric and a brighter future and then stayed to help me build it." Zachary pulled her into his arms. "Best 10 years of my life." "Mine too," Fiona said. "Here is to 10 more and 10 more after that." They closed up the shop and walked home together through the quiet streets of San Pedro. The moon was rising, full and bright, and Fiona remembered that first night when she had been sewing by moonlight because she could not afford candles. So much had changed since then, but the core of who they were remained the same. She was still the woman who worked hard and dreamed big, and he was still the man who saw her worth and helped her achieve those dreams. At home, they found Samuel and Rose already in bed, though Samuel was still awake, reading by lamplight. He looked up as his parents entered. "Did you finish the shirt?" he asked his mother. "She did," Zachary said, doing a turn to show it off. "What do you think? It looks good," Samuel said. "Mother, will you teach me to embroider like that? I want to make something for Rose's birthday." "Of course," Fiona said, surprised and pleased. "What did you want to make?" "A handkerchief," Samuel said, "with her name on it. Father has been teaching me to carve, but I think this would be better for a handkerchief." Fiona felt her heart swell with pride. Her son, who was so much like his father in many ways, had clearly inherited some of her creativity and attention to detail. "We will start lessons this week," she promised. They tucked Samuel in and checked on Rose, who was sleeping peacefully. Her red gold hair spread across her pillow. Then they retired to their own room, where they celebrated their anniversary in the privacy of their marriage bed. Life continued its steady pace. The children grew, the business flourished, and Fiona and Zachary's love deepened with each passing year. They had disagreements, of course, and stressful times when money was tight or illness struck the family. But they always worked through it together, their partnership strong and their commitment unshakable. Samuel, at 16, decided he wanted to follow in his father's footsteps and become a mountain guide. Zachary took him on longer expeditions, teaching him everything he knew. Rose, at 14, was already a skilled seamstress, creating pieces that rivaled her mother's work. She talked about opening her own shop one day, maybe in a bigger city like Tucson or Phoenix. "They grow up so fast," Fiona said one evening, watching Rose work on a complicated embroidery pattern. "They do," Zachary agreed, "but we raise them well. They are both good people ready to make their way in the world." "I am not ready to let them go," Fiona confessed. "We do not have to yet," Zachary said. "We have a few more years. But when the time comes, we will let them go with our blessing and our love, knowing we did our best by them." Fiona nodded, knowing he was right but still feeling the bittersweet ache of watching her children become adults. On their 15th wedding anniversary, the whole town threw a celebration in honor of Fiona and Zachary. The party was held in the town square, with food and music and speeches honoring the couple who had become pillars of the community. Tom Carter, now elderly but still sharp, gave a speech about the night Zachary had first come to his store asking about fabric, and how he had known immediately that something special was about to happen. "I have seen a lot in my years," Tom said, "but I have never seen two people more meant for each other than Fiona and Zachary. They built something beautiful together, not just a successful business but a true partnership based on love and respect. They are an example to all of us." Fiona cried and Zachary held her, his own eyes suspiciously bright. Samuel and Rose stood with them, clearly embarrassed by the attention but also proud of their parents. Later, after the party had wound down and they were walking home as a family, Rose said, "I want what you and Father have, Mother, a love that lasts and grows stronger." "You will find it," Fiona assured her, "when you are ready and when you meet the right person." "How did you know Father was the right person?" Rose asked. Fiona thought about it. "He saw me. Not just the seamstress, not just the woman with dreams of a shop. He saw all of me, the scared parts and the brave parts and the tired parts. And he loved all of it. That is how I knew." "And he brought you fabric," Samuel added with a grin. "And he brought me fabric," Fiona agreed, laughing. "Never underestimate the romantic power of quality textiles." Zachary chuckled and pulled her close. "I would bring you the world if I could, but I figured fabric was more practical." "You brought me everything I needed," Fiona said. "A brighter future, a home, a family. Everything." Time marched on as it always does. Samuel eventually did become a mountain guide, working alongside his father and earning his own reputation as knowledgeable and reliable. Rose opened a small shop within her mother's establishment, specializing in fine embroidery and delicate work. She had inherited her mother's skill and her father's business sense, and her work was soon in high demand. When Samuel was 20 and Rose was 18, another significant change came to the family. Samuel fell in love with a schoolteacher who had come to San Pedro from Denver. Her name was Elizabeth, and she was intelligent, kind, and shared Samuel's love of the mountains. Zachary and Fiona welcomed her into the family with open arms. The wedding was held in the same church where Fiona and Zachary had married 20 years before. Fiona made Elizabeth's dress, a beautiful creation of white silk and lace. As she worked on it, sewing late into the evenings by lamplight, she thought about that first dress she had made from Zachary's fabric, Mrs. Henderson's blue calico dress. She had come so far since then. At the wedding, Zachary walked Elizabeth down the aisle in place of her father, who had passed away years before. Fiona watched from the front row, tears streaming down her face as her son pledged his love and his life to his bride. She felt Zachary's hand find hers, and they shared a look that needed no words. This was what they had worked for, what they had built together. A family, a legacy, a future that extended beyond just the two of them. The celebration afterward was joyful and loud, with music and dancing that went on late into the night. Fiona danced with her husband, with her son, with Tom Carter, who was now quite old but still spry enough to manage a slow waltz. She felt surrounded by love, by community, by the life she had built in this rough Arizona town. "Happy?" Zachary asked as they danced. "So happy I could burst," Fiona said. "You could not be happier," Zachary said. "Though I must admit it is strange to think of Samuel married. Seems like just yesterday he was a baby." "They grow up," Fiona said. "That is what they are supposed to do." "I know," Zachary said. "Doesn't make it any easier." 2 years later, Rose fell in love as well. Her young man was a rancher's son named Thomas, who had come to the shop to have shirts made and had been instantly smitten with the red-haired seamstress. He courted her properly, bringing her flowers and taking her on chaperoned walks. Zachary approved, seeing in Thomas the same qualities of honesty and hard work that he valued. Rose's wedding was equally beautiful. She wore a dress she had made herself with her mother's help, a creation of ivory silk covered in delicate embroidery. Every stitch represented hours of work, and it was clear to everyone who saw it that this was a labor of love. After both children were married and establishing households of their own, Fiona and Zachary found themselves alone together again for the first time in over 20 years. It was strange at first, the house too quiet without Samuel's laughter or Rose's singing. But gradually, they adjusted and found that they enjoyed having time to themselves again. "We could travel," Zachary suggested one evening. "See some of the country we have never visited. We have worked hard for many years. Maybe it is time to enjoy ourselves." "What about the shop?" Fiona asked. "Rose and her assistants can manage it," Zachary said. "You have trained them well, and Samuel can handle my guide business. We could take a few months, see California, maybe even go up to Oregon. I have always wanted to see the Pacific Ocean." Fiona thought about it. The idea was both exciting and terrifying. She had never been one to leave work unattended, but Zachary was right. They had worked hard, built something lasting. Maybe it was time to step back a little and enjoy the fruits of their labor. "Let us do it," she said. "Let us take an adventure together." They spent the next few months planning their trip, arranging for the business to be managed in their absence, and preparing for an extended journey. Samuel and Rose were supportive, encouraging their parents to take time for themselves. In the spring of 1882, Fiona and Zachary set out on their adventure. They traveled by train to California, marveling at the speed and comfort compared to the wagon or horseback journeys they were used to. In San Francisco, they walked along the ocean shore, hand in hand, watching the waves crash against the rocks. "I never imagined I would see this," Fiona said. "When I left California all those years ago, I thought I would never come back." "Are you glad we came?" Zachary asked. "With you, yes," Fiona said. "Everything is better with you." They traveled up the coast to Oregon, through forests so thick and green they seemed like another world. They visited Portland and Seattle, stayed in hotels, and ate in fine restaurants. It was a different life than what they were used to, but they enjoyed it as a temporary adventure. But by the time they had been gone 3 months, both of them were ready to go home. They missed San Pedro, their family, their work. The travel had been wonderful, but home was where they belonged. When they returned to San Pedro, they found the town had continued to grow in their absence. There was talk of the railroad coming through, which would bring even more development. Their children greeted them with hugs and updates, showing off how well they had managed the businesses. "You were right," Fiona told Zachary that night, lying in their own bed. "We did need that trip, but I am so glad to be home." "Me too," Zachary said, "though I would travel to the ends of the earth with you if you wanted." "I would rather stay here," Fiona said. "This is where our life is. This is where we built our future." Life settled back into familiar rhythms, but with the freedom of knowing they could step away if they wanted to. Samuel and Elizabeth had a baby, a little girl they named Helen after Elizabeth's mother, making Fiona and Zachary grandparents for the first time. The experience filled them both with wonder and joy. Zachary would sit for hours holding his granddaughter, singing her the same songs he had sung to Samuel and Rose. Fiona made tiny dresses and blankets, her needle flying through the soft fabrics with practiced ease. "She is beautiful," Fiona said, watching her husband with their grandchild. "Takes after her grandmother," Zachary said. Within 2 years, Rose also had a baby, a boy named Zachary after his grandfather. Then Samuel and Elizabeth had a son, and Rose had another baby. The family continued to expand, bringing new life and new joy. As Fiona and Zachary grew older, they gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of their businesses. Rose took over the dress shop completely, running it with skill and adding her own touches. Samuel's guide business flourished, and he even hired other guides to work for him, expanding the operation beyond what Zachary had ever imagined. On their 30th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the house for a celebration. Children and grandchildren filled every room, their laughter and noise a beautiful chaos. Fiona, now in her early 50s with silver threading through her dark hair, looked around at the family they had created and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Zachary, his own hair more silver than dark now but still strong and healthy, found her in the kitchen and pulled her into his arms. 30 years, he said. Best 30 years of my life." "Mine too," Fiona said, "though I hope we have many more ahead of us." "We will," Zachary promised. "We will grow old together, watching our grandchildren grow, watching the business continue. We will sit on our porch in the evening and watch the sun set over the mountains. We will keep building our life day by day." "That sounds perfect," Fiona said. They kissed, and their children and grandchildren cheered, embarrassing them both but also making them laugh. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet again, Fiona and Zachary sat on their porch as he had promised, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. The mountains rose in the distance, solid and eternal. "You ever miss it?" Fiona asked. Your old life in the mountains before you met me? No, Zachary said without hesitation. That was not a life, Fiona. It was just existing. This is living. Every single moment with you has been worth more than all those years alone. I feel the same, Fiona said. When I was sewing by moonlight in that tiny cabin, trying to scrape together a future, I never imagined I could have all this. The shop, this house, our children and grandchildren. You gave me all of it. We gave it to each other, Zachary corrected. We built it together. Together, Fiona agreed and squeezed his hand. The years continued to pass, gentle and good. Fiona and Zachary aged gracefully, remaining active and involved in their families' lives. They watched their grandchildren grow, attended school programs and birthday parties, and remained the beloved center of an ever-expanding family tree. Zachary still took the occasional trip into the mountains, though shorter and easier than his expeditions of old. Sometimes Samuel would go with him, and later, Samuel's son, their grandson young Zachary, began joining them. The tradition of knowledge and skill was being passed down through the generations. Fiona still sewed, though more for pleasure than necessity now. She made quilts for her grandchildren, embroidered samplers with family sayings, and took on only the most special projects. Her eyesight was not what it once was, but her skill had not diminished. Every stitch was still perfect, placed with the same care she had shown when she first started sewing as a young girl. On their 40th wedding anniversary, the family threw a massive celebration. It seemed like the entire town of San Pedro turned out, along with family members who traveled from as far as California and Colorado. There were speeches and toasts, music and dancing, and a huge feast that required 3 separate tables to hold all the food. Tom Carter had passed away years before, but his son, who now ran the general store, gave a speech about how his father had always said that Fiona and Zachary's marriage was the best match he had ever helped make. "My father used to say that some people are meant to find each other," he said. "That fate or God or whatever you believe in puts certain people in each other's paths, because together they can create something neither could create alone." He believed that about Fiona and Zachary, and looking at their family, looking at all they have built together, I think he was right. Fiona cried, of course. She cried at everything these days, her emotions closer to the surface than they had been when she was young. But Zachary just held her and smiled, his own eyes misty. That night, lying in bed in the house they had built together 40 years ago, Fiona turned to her husband. "I would do it all again," she said. "Every moment, every hardship, every joy. I would choose you every single time." "I know," Zachary said, "because I would choose you every single time too. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Fiona. You took a lonely mountain man and taught him what it means to truly live, to truly love. I will be grateful for that until my last breath." "We still have many years ahead of us," Fiona said. "I know," Zachary said, "and I plan to make every single one of them count." They fell asleep in each other's arms, just as they had every night for 40 years. The years that followed were gentle and sweet. Fiona and Zachary's health remained good, and they continued to be active in their families' lives and in the community. The railroad finally came to San Pedro, bringing more growth and change, but the core of the town remained the same. It was still a place where people worked hard and looked out for each other, where a woman could build a business from nothing, and a mountain man could find a home. Great-grandchildren started arriving, bringing new energy and chaos to family gatherings. Fiona made tiny clothes for them, just as she had for her own children and grandchildren. Zachary carved wooden toys, his large hands still steady despite his age. They took walks together every evening, moving slower than they once had but still enjoying the Arizona sunset, the mountains, the life they had built. People in town would smile and nod as they passed, everyone knowing the story of the seamstress and the mountain man who had fallen in love and built an empire on hard work and devotion. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the celebration was smaller, just family, but no less joyful. Fiona and Zachary sat in places of honor, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, an enormous family tree that had started with a knock on a cabin door and a bundle of fabric. 50 years, Fiona said, looking at Zachary with wonder. Half a century together. Best 50 years anyone ever had, Zachary said. Rose, now a grandmother herself, stood to make a toast. To my parents, who showed us all what true love looks like, you taught us that love is not just a feeling but a choice you make every day. You taught us the value of hard work, of treating people fairly, of building something that lasts. You gave us roots and wings, a foundation to stand on and the confidence to fly. We love you both more than words can say. Everyone raised their glasses, and Fiona felt tears streaming down her face again. But they were happy tears, grateful tears. She looked around at the faces of her family, seeing pieces of herself and Zachary in all of them, and felt that her life had been extraordinarily blessed. That night, Zachary carried Fiona over the threshold of their house one more time, just as he had on their wedding night 50 years before. She laughed and protested that they were too old for such foolishness, but he insisted. I carried you over the threshold of our first home, he said. I will carry you over the threshold of our last one too, every anniversary until I cannot any more. You are a stubborn man, Zachary Donovan, Fiona said. And you are a stubborn woman, Fiona Donovan, he replied. That is why we work so well together. They spent their golden years in contentment, watching their family grow, watching San Pedro continue to develop and thrive. Fiona lived to see her great-grandchildren learn to sew, passing on her skills one more generation. Zachary lived to see his great-grandsons learn to track and navigate the mountains, keeping alive the knowledge he had spent a lifetime acquiring. They grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. When Zachary's joints started to ache from old injuries and years of hard work, Fiona would rub them with liniment and tell him stories to distract him from the pain. When Fiona's eyesight faded to the point where she could no longer sew, Zachary would sit with her and describe the mountains in such detail that she could see them in her mind's eye. They celebrated their 55th anniversary quietly, just the two of them, sitting on their porch and watching the sun set. They had fewer words now, having said most of what needed saying over the decades, but their silence was comfortable, filled with understanding and deep affection. No regrets, Zachary asked. Not a single one, Fiona said. You? Only that I did not find you sooner, Zachary said, that we did not have even more years together. We have had more than most people get, Fiona said. A full life, a good life, that is enough. It will never be enough, Zachary said. I could have 1,000 years with you and still want more. Fiona smiled and leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat together as the stars came out, one by one, filling the desert sky with light. They were blessed to have several more years together, years filled with small pleasures and family joy. But eventually, as must happen to all of us, death came calling. Zachary, in his early 80s, passed away peacefully in his sleep one spring morning, lying next to Fiona in the bed they had shared for nearly 6 decades. Fiona woke to find him gone, and though her heart broke, there was also a sense of peace. He had lived a full life, had been surrounded by love until the very end. She held his hand one last time, her tears falling on his weathered face, and whispered, "Thank you. Thank you for everything. Thank you for bringing me fabric and a brighter future. Thank you for loving me." The funeral was one of the largest San Pedro had ever seen. People came from all over the territory to pay their respects to the mountain man, who had become a pillar of the community. His children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren mourned him, sharing stories of his kindness, his strength, his wisdom. Fiona, dressed in black, stood straight and dignified through the service. She did not want Zachary remembered with excessive grief. He had lived too well, loved too deeply, accomplished too much to be mourned as if his life had been a tragedy. It had been a triumph, and she would honor that. After the funeral, family and friends worried about Fiona. She was 80 herself now, and they feared she would not survive long without her husband. But Fiona had always been stronger than she looked. She continued living, not just existing but truly living, honoring Zachary's memory by embracing each day. She still went to the shop, though she mostly just visited now. She would sit and talk with Rose and the younger seamstresses, sharing stories of the early days. She attended family gatherings and church services. She took walks through San Pedro, remembering different moments of her life with Zachary, smiling at the memories even as tears slipped down her weathered cheeks. On what would have been their 60th wedding anniversary, Fiona's family gathered around her. They had wanted to cancel any celebration out of respect for Zachary's passing, but Fiona had insisted. "We should celebrate," she said. "Celebrate that we had him for as long as we did. Celebrate the life we built together. Celebrate the family that continues because of our love." That is what Zachary would want. So they gathered and they celebrated, sharing stories and laughter and tears. Fiona sat in the center of it all, feeling Zachary's presence even though he was gone. She could almost hear his voice, feel his hand in hers. That night, alone in the house that felt too big and too empty without him, Fiona went to the trunk where she kept her most precious possessions. She pulled out the wooden box Zachary had given her on their first anniversary, the one carved with such care and love. She opened it and found inside all the small treasures of their life together. The first button from the first shirt she had ever mended for him, a pressed flower from their wedding bouquet, letters he had written to her when he was away on expeditions, a lock of hair from each of their children. She held the box to her chest and cried, really cried, for the first time since his passing. She cried for the loss of him, for the empty space beside her in bed, for all the conversations they would never have and all the sunsets they would never watch together. She cried until she had no tears left, and then she carefully put the box back in the trunk, but she did not despair. Zachary had given her too much for her to give up now. She still had children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who loved her. She still had the business they had built together, still thriving and providing for another generation. She still had her memories, precious and perfect, of a love that had sustained her for almost 60 years. Fiona lived for 3 more years after Zachary's passing. They were good years, filled with family and friendship and the satisfaction of a life well lived. She got to see 2 more great-great-grandchildren born, marveling at how the family continued to grow and expand. She taught the youngest generation of girls how to sew, passing on skills that had been passed down to her, creating a chain that would continue long after she was gone. On a warm June evening, just after her 83rd birthday, Fiona sat on her porch watching the sunset one last time. She could almost feel Zachary beside her, his hand in hers, his voice describing the mountains she could no longer see clearly. "I am ready," she whispered to the gathering darkness. "I am ready to be with you again." That night, Fiona passed away peacefully in her sleep, just as Zachary had. The family mourned her passing but also celebrated her life. She had started with nothing, a scared woman fleeing a bad situation, and she had built something remarkable. She had loved deeply and been deeply loved in return. She had created beauty with her hands and raised children who continued her legacy. She had lived, truly lived, every single day of her long life. They buried her next to Zachary, under a tree on a hill overlooking San Pedro. On her gravestone, along with her name and dates, they inscribed, "The seamstress who sewed by moonlight. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, she built a future from fabric and love." The dress shop continued to operate for many years after, run by Rose and then by Rose's daughter and then by her granddaughter. Each generation added their own touches, but they all honored the foundation that Fiona had laid. They all told stories about the remarkable woman who had started it all, who had worked by moonlight to save money, who had taken a chance on a mountain man who brought her fabric and love, and a brighter future than she had ever imagined possible. And in those stories, Fiona and Zachary lived on, their love a testament to what two people can build when they commit to each other completely, when they work together toward shared dreams, when they choose love every single day for a lifetime. They had created something that lasted, something that mattered, something that would echo through generations. Their story became a legend in San Pedro, told and retold until it was hard to separate fact from embellishment. But at the heart of it, the truth remained simple and beautiful. A seamstress who worked by moonlight met a mountain man who brought her fabric, and together they built a love that changed not just their own lives, but the lives of everyone they touched. They had found each other against all odds, and they had held on, building a life of meaning and purpose and deep, abiding love. It was, in every sense, a story of the Wild West, where dreams were big and life was hard, but anything was possible for those brave enough to reach for it. Fiona and Zachary had been brave enough, and they had won not just prosperity, but something far more valuable. A love that lasted a lifetime and beyond, a family that would carry their legacy forward, and memories that would never fade. Their house stood for many more decades, eventually becoming a historical landmark. Visitors would walk through the rooms where Fiona and Zachary had lived and loved and raised their family, seeing the work table where she had sewn, the wooden box he had carved for her, the photographs of their expanding family. And they would leave inspired, reminded that true love exists, that hard work pays off, that two people who commit to each other can build something remarkable. The mountains that Zachary had loved still stood, solid and eternal, watching over the town that had given him a home and a family. And somewhere in those mountains, in a small cabin slowly being reclaimed by the forest, his spirit lingered, content and at peace, waiting for the woman who had made his life complete. The fabric that Zachary had brought to Fiona that first night, the beginning of everything, was long gone, sewn into dresses and shirts and worn to threads by daily use. But what it represented, the promise of something better, a future built on hope and hard work and love, that remained. That would always remain, passed down through the generations. A reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from unexpected places, from a knock on the door at midnight, from a mountain man with a bundle of fabric and a lonely seamstress sewing by moonlight, both of them hoping for something more. And they had gotten something more. They had gotten everything. They had gotten each other, and that had been enough to build a lifetime of joy, a family that would endure, and a love story that would never be forgotten.